Here we go. Week 15, another week here for the Leonis support. Welcome, everybody. JB and I back for a very busy week of announcements. JB, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. It's actually my birthday today. I'm getting pretty old. So yeah, I'm actually my family is away for a couple days here too. So I'm been kind of lonely in the house and just kind of working on some YouTube stuff. Put out a video and looking at Ferris today, and yeah, had some free time. It's kind of feels weird.
I love it. I honestly wish I knew sooner. If I'd known today was your birthday, there's no doubt I would have tried to make a plan for you and I to get together so we could, like, obviously, like, hang out, but do the podcast together live and have a little mini birthday celebration. But yeah,
We totally should do that
next
soon.
year. Right. We'll do a belated get together. We have a bunch that we're going to cover. Just real quickly, the lineup, Howlet and his vision card, a little bit about Deah, Transcendence and MA2s, just some of the big ones we think are noteworthy. The plus 6 equipment and some of the new reliquiaries and just anything to keep an eye on. A couple of miscellaneous things, but the bulk of what we want to go over, we're going to talk a little bit about 70 cost and their impacts, where that was kind of a big topic last week with Sweetheart Miranda. We do want to look at Leela the Bold, her Transcendence, and MA2 is coming to Global this week. The Light versus Dark in a future look and seeing how that's kind of balanced. There's also a JP tweak, the new affinity toggles where you can turn off unit affinity, what kind of impact we think that could have. Obviously not only PvE where there's a lot of micromanaging, but just general PvP. A little bit about the FanFest meetup that just occurred this last week, and then we're going to do a Warrior of the Crystals tier list to finally cap things off. So a lot to go over today. Howlet got bumped up here now. What do you think about that? Are you surprised that they accelerated the calendar for him?
I am. That was very unexpected. He was, I think initially we were looking at like mid-July for him. Yeah, there's the timeline there. So yeah, he's essentially jumping ahead of Dialdo in line here. We were looking at Dialdo and then Dark Golem there. So it's kind of cool. I mean, for the Howlet fans out there, like we talked a little bit about him last week.
Right.
He's a solid unit. I think he has some good matchups now in the meta. Like he kind of specializes going into slash and magic attack based teams. So we have Bradley and Queen Mashari core teams. We have Dark Fina and Sephiroth and Dwayne core teams.
Yep.
So I think there's some value there you could get out of him if you're interested in this character. Is he like a must pull? You got to go grab him like meta type unit. I wouldn't go that far.
No, I agree. Yeah, I'm honestly very impressed with just the uniqueness they've taken for him. The one thing that I think is a little bit different is that he's not one of those courage re-raise characters. He's really just about self-sustain and some healing, and he's got some mechanics in there where obviously some heal back, not only on a buff, but on a couple attacks, and his sword allows him to do some interesting things with different HP thresholds. Got some counter cure as one of the abilities, so I overall like what they did, that they tried to get away from some of the typical survivability aspects. Because if you go down the list, it's really like a handful. It's courage, re-raise, barrier, healing, evasion is a type of, survivability. It's a whole bunch of things. And after a while, you kind of get through the same cycle of things. So it's good to see it mixed up. How impactful it is, we kind of know, but it remains to be seen. But either way, it's a solid character overall. I think he's a great addition to Ice.
He has very strong strike resistance too, and with his vision card, just like base with the vision card, he's at 50%. Like if you main slot that card, throw
Yep.
in an Esper like Bahamut, got 15% on there and a very strong magic based Esper for him. He can completely shut down those strike teams. With if you pair him with Reagan and Velis, they're not going to be able to do any damage to them.
Nothing.
So
And even the slash based teams, there's that niche of him hitting 100% slash res. It's possible. And although there's a lot of penetration, which I'd normally just be like, means nothing, one of his abilities is a decrease of slash res pen of 40. So, there's some timing things there to make sure that you use it properly. But that's one of those characters that I don't fully discount it, because there is some counterplay to the amount of slash res pen. I don't think it's necessarily reliable, but that's hefty. I've actually been surprised with some characters with the amount of slash res, how bulky they end up being anyway.
yeah, I mean it's on one of his core attacks and it also reduces magic attack resistance penetration. So.
Yep.
Pretty interesting kits. We haven't seen anything like that before. We've seen defense pen reduction or spirit pen reduction on more,
Right.
but yeah, this is a first of its kind. So
Yeah. I,
definitely notable for that reason.
I think, was it Summer Ketone has something similar? I think she has a slash attack. She's a modifier down, but not a penetration reduction. The modifier
Correct.
ended up not being impactful enough. It's just not enough of the equation to take away. But the penetration that's a very valid way to stop some of the incoming damage. So again, when you talk about creative ways that he mitigates damage, that's a good one, because if you think real late in the fight after someone's buff might have worn off, they normally have 40 slash res pen and he can bring them to 0. I mean, that's a substantial nerf to their incoming damage. So it's fun to think about.
Yeah, I mean, look at Bradley. He's got the 40%. Maybe you got the 10% on the trust stone or what have you. He's got his limit burst, but he's got to get in range to use that, and he always likes to use that rend ability from long range. So,
Yep.
If you can get that off on him, you're going to force him into using that LB. Maybe he doesn't have the AP to use it,
Right.
so that can always be a factor. Yeah, good character. Personally, I don't know if I'm going to go all in and go 42K for him. Plan to do a couple pulls on him, the 300 paid, and maybe I'll do the Mindsphere pull. That's kind of what I'm setting aside right now.
Me too. I've done that a lot as of late. I've ended up pulling the characters just by a happen chance. It was not intentional. But yeah, I'll at least get the Mind Spheres for the later opportunities of pulling that character. There's a small voice in my head that kind of wants to go for him, because I did go all in on Reagan. And I do think there's something to be said there. And again, I don't fully trust the JP meta either, because they are a little bit different than, not a little, they're a lot different than where we are right now in terms of what we have for Dwayne, what they had for Strike. And then honestly, I think they were a little tapped out spend wise. So not that we're not, we obviously are, but I do also kind of factor that in sometimes, where I'm like, sometimes characters probably just don't get pulled because they didn't have the money at the time. You know what I mean? And that's not a reflection of the character strength. It's just a timing thing. So I am intrigued just to play around with that, but we'll see how far it actually gets.
I think to that point, global, and we talked a little bit about this last week with the Miranda card. We have 5 global exclusive cards that JP doesn't have for this Red Mage group. So
Exactly.
that alone completely changes, potential team compositions that you can make with him. So
Right. Yeah.
that is another feather in his cap for sure.
Yeah, displaying the vision card here. This one, I'll be honest, I think this is more of a sub card, sub slot vision card. I don't think there's anything here that's worthy of that primary slot when you talk about stats. And although they're probably giving Howlet that extra agility, as we saw mentioned for the global buff, I don't think that's enough to really do anything here. I think it's a valuable card. Again, you're building up some of that strike res. The 6 spirit or whatever it ends up being is maybe even less 4 spirit, obviously not noteworthy. At the end of the day, I really think it's a more of a niche card, and probably one of the worst Red Mage sword cards, to be honest.
Yeah, sometimes these cards I wish like the bestowed ability was a little bit more interesting, like with maybe the 10 area resist that some cards get. And then that can maybe be a consideration if you're really trying to stack up some area resist on someone. This one with just the magic and slash resist, and even the agility, which, like you said, it's pretty nice. Like unless you're going for that really anti-strike builds and kind of hunting those teams, yeah, secondary. I agree.
Yeah, and you bring a good point on that unit perspective too. That's something that I would like to see, because with a lot of these vision cards, they obviously don't affect all 3 party members at all times, and I feel like a good compensation to that as a trade-off. Well, if someone on your team is not going to get the benefit, I like the idea that the person who does get the benefit gets extra benefit. So at least like from a total team perspective, it kind of balances. But then again, after a year or two, when you have all these vision cards, you might have overtuned that once you get the full selection.
Yeah, I've totally done that in rainbow teams where there's one unit that's not getting any benefit, but the bestowed ability is super good. I can get 10 area resists and throw and maybe the base stats are beneficial as well.
Right.
And that's good enough, maybe for that unit to kind of do what they need to do. So
exactly. That's Howlet for now. I know the character review coming out soon. I know you have your future look that you already did as well. We have another character coming here though. That's the 50 cost water unit, Deah. Who, a lot of similarities from what I can tell to a more recent unit we got with Valentine Miranda, just in terms of the main job, if you will. Water has not got some love in a long time. 50 cost units are things to be excited about, though. What do you think of Deah? Any initial thoughts on her?
I know that this was like a character that a lot of people wanted to see, like from the story, like it's obviously like a prime waifu for a lot of people out there. But I'm stoked that Water is actually getting a good MR unit. Like that is a huge deficiency for the elements overall.
Yep.
They have Krace, she's okay, but this is something that maybe people are looking to throw Celis and Perrine and some of these other water units out in limited or class match, stuff like that. This is a unit you can bring in now. She's very solid. I think that's very comparable to Miranda. Obviously the same main job. The stats are pretty close as well. One kind of weird thing about her, though, is that she does have that operative sub job.
Yes.
Which, obviously that's a physical job, and they don't even give her the barrier there, which, obviously I think would have been nice because she just has the physical barrier kind of in the main job.
Yep.
She could have maybe got a general barrier there. So the only reason I can really even see to run operative on would maybe you were trying to get some kind of evade buff off, but even that's like super
Super
niche.
niche, yeah. No, that's one of those sub jobs. I've come to conclusion at this point that a lot of these sub jobs are put in their A for their passive abilities, where obviously a character typically needs some kind of tweak, and an easy way for them to do that is by just stealing the passive abilities other classes have. And so the operative, the one that she gets is the move +1 and a decreased chance of being targeted of 3. So that one on its own is certainly a nice one. And the other one is the evasion rate of 12 and the acquired AP of 40. Now the evasion rate's likely whatever, but the acquired AP, when we look at the AP of this character, again, it's like Valentine Miranda. One of the big downsides is that it's the 20% starting AP of what they normally get. And so that's one of those things that I can see they probably tried to address it from that way rather than going the route of a mastery ability or something. But yeah, to the point of a 50 cost unit, it allows a lot more opportunities for water, where their strongest units are obviously the 190 cost units. And when you start putting them in a team, what you have left for remaining cost, you really can't work with for water. So this is a great add for them, magic oriented, which I think a lot of the base of water is very magic friendly. Maybe not as of late with Preen and Astrius and whatnot, but talk about the other water units. Yeah, magic is right up their alley. So this is a good add.
So one thing is that this unit has like a lot of accuracy modifiers. Like she can get 45 accuracy from passives, two that you would probably use in a lot of cases. And then the Rune Knight, she does get the ability that reduces evasion by 50 for that cast for
Right.
on a pretty good modifier. So she'll be able to hit Yuffie, if you kind of build her up, especially if you throw some MR scrolls into her, maybe they're a little bit more accessible. So
That's a very good call out. Yeah, absolutely correct. Yeah.
so not a bad unit at all. I like it.
Definitely. We're very much looking forward to that. Those 50 cost units are fun. Good. All right. Well, we also have those new Transcendences that are coming out, as well as some MA2s. Real quickly, the Transcendence units, so we'll talk about just some of the thumbs up and thumbs downs. It's Howlet, Rain, and Lastwell. And then they're giving some to Miraga and Lamega as well, some of those select quest units. Have you looked at any of the 5 of these? Do you have any of these that you like in particular off the top of your head?
Howlet, Rain, Laswell, those are some classic characters there. Those are some year 1 units.
Yep.
Howlet's whatever. He's not good.
His is not good.
Laswell, it's okay. Ice is like I think we've mentioned this before. They're just missing the luck card.
Yes.
And then he could be a decent evade unit.
Absolutely.
But he's okay. He's always been, he's just okay.
Yeah.
He's still like a good PvE character and stuff like
Absolutely,
that.
yeah.
Rain, I think is out of those 3 is the best. He actually gets a nice upgrade. He gets agility, which he has needed.
Right.
He gets even more area resist, which can stack onto a bunch that he has now.
Yep.
Get some new mechanics with the elemental chain resistance.
Yep.
And then the debuff weakening and the 5 hate. So that is like a really big upgrade for him.
Huge. Yeah, so I wanted to spend some time to talk about that. Now, off the top of my head right now, that debuff weakening of 30, I know JP just got a vision card that has that. Do you know how that mechanic works? My understanding of that debuff weakening is that it's not like the current debuff res where it's a percentage. Debuff res of 25 right now means that there's a 25% chance it doesn't happen. My understanding of this debuff is that it actually reduces the percentage of the debuff. So if you have a 30% imperil, let's say being attacked, and someone has 30 decreased debuff, whatever, you decrease the imperil by 30%, so you decrease it by 9. And that's obviously a little unique. So I think that's a really interesting way to go about some of the debuffs.
No, that's exactly how it works. There was some confusion about this because when it was initially this ability was put into WOTV Calc, it was put as just general debuff resistance. Like that's what we thought Dialdo had and
Right.
Raph had when they were first released. Once Glassy came into the game and it was kind of found out this is actually a new mechanic, they went back and fixed those entries for Raph and Dialdo as well. But it works exactly like that. They just cut the power of the Imperil. So
I love it.
it's good. It's actually pretty nice, especially if you could stack that with a vision card, which, like you said, they just started implementing in JP. I think it's the new Elseril card.
Yes, they did. And yeah, Reigns is overall, I love what they did with this. So the agility of 10%, it's not game breaking for him. It's really going to keep him still at the bottom of that list overall. But I like what they did here for their survivability metrics, where one of the poor things about being a slow unit is that higher chance to get chained on, where people are just going to lap you inevitably. And so having some of that chain resistance, it probably needs more than just the 40. You could use some extra externally at some point, however they do that. But overall, that's one way to attack it. I like that. The debuff weakening, the same idea. If you're going to get lapped and you're going to get imperiled and whatnot, just being able to reduce the impact of that, I think, is a good one. But the 5 and 8 hate is absolutely enormous. One of the biggest problems with Rain, in my opinion, is that in order for him him to generate hate, he has to use his main sub job, the Knight of Grandshelt. And quite honestly, you want him to use Red Mage, like having that jamming thrust and a couple other abilities there, the restore HP, and the fact that you're always locked into his main sub job to get that hate going is a massive downside to him overall. So giving that freedom, very big like usability buff.
Yeah, I think that he's actually going to become a usable character, like a real character, like
Yeah.
somebody that for the first times, like pretty much since the first few months after he was released, where people played him a decent amount back then.
Definitely.
Since the whole era of his EX, he got maybe a little bit of use with the Fire Bros with King Mons, just because there was really nobody else to kind of use at that time. But he dropped off very, very quickly and hasn't really seen much use. He still does have the problem of being incredibly inaccurate, and obviously he doesn't have any penetrations and things like that, so his damage isn't all that good. But he's got some nice debuffs still, like he's got the Fire Imperil, he's got Undermine, he's got some good debuffs there that he can throw out. He's got the slow and stuff like that. So
Yep.
I like it quite a bit. So I'm gonna try to play around with him with Kefka.
Most definitely. I think it's a good angle to take. So good. And then on that note, we're also getting Miraga and Lamega. And I know you and I have talked Miraga up a fair bit here, just wanting that earth tank of sorts. And Miraga's here is that slash res 20, AoE res of 10. The Ruinous Axe is going to become a general dispel, which I think is a fantastic buff for him overall. He's not really a utility-based character. It's basically just a bunch of modifiers, and that's basically it. I think this is great for what he needs to do his job. This is a big up, not big, but I would say it's a very thumbs up upgrade.
So the thing about these selection quest characters is you just can grind out and completely max them with reincarnation, just like Lucio.
Yep.
The difference with these is that they will cost you an antler. They're obviously they're a little bit harder to come by, but Moraga is probably one of those that's worth it for a lot of people out there, especially if maybe you're holding off on Dialdo and planning to go for Raph or something like that. I think Moraga can if you fully reincarnate him, this he can be a passable tank.
I would agree with that. Yeah, definitely. In the list of tanks in the game, I wouldn't say he's top 3 or top 5, but he's definitely a usable tank. There's some tanks that I just say, unfortunately, haven't kept up, and I don't think he's one of them.
Yeah, he'll be able to tank just on pure HP alone, like getting another 3,300 HP and then like some nice defensive stats there too. Like it's a nice upgrade for him. You can +1 his helmet and get even more area resist there too.
Yep, definitely do that if you haven't already. And then one character that I've never seen use, Lamega. Unfortunately, they've just never been good enough for usage. He's got some interesting upgrades here. I don't think it's enough, but I think it's a really interesting approach they took. They basically gave him some bulk with HP, strike 15, and they gave him on his buff, his main buff essentially. Like 2 of his other abilities gain a physical barrier break, like 2 or 3 different abilities do, or 2 abilities do. And they both get ignore sure hit for 3 turns. So I've never really known him to be hyper accurate. I'd imagine you can probably get him up to that level, but I don't think this is likely going to move the needle for his usage overall.
Yeah, I think like for the general player base, he's pretty niche. I will say though that when he's fully reincarnated, he can be very, very evasive.
Good point.
He already is very evasive. So him throwing the sure hit nullification on himself it's nothing to see. You'll have to respect him, if he's built correctly, I think.
Yep. And I'm sorry, I misspoke. I misunderstood that. I thought it was for him. Ignore sure hit. He gets it himself. So thank you for that. I misspoke on that. Yep. That's big. So good. Right. And then on MA2s, we also have Titus and Shell getting their Transcendences, but I know those are not really anything to necessarily analyze. But for the MA2s, we have Leela the Bold, and we're actually going to pause on her for the moment because we're going to do a segment on her in just a little bit, but she's also getting her MA2. In the future, she's getting her Transcendence. But for other MA2s, Rachis, Resnick, Cyrell, I don't know if Rachis and Cyrell is really much to talk about. Cyrell is a really good one for an MR. They're giving her a one-time barrier and some fit and unit res. I think Resnick might be the biggest name here to look at, where she's getting magic 10% and 10 defense and spirit, which that was really interesting. So not bad.
Yeah, so like Rachis, that's going to be really nice for guild raids. Like she's a guild raid staple for the water teams. Spirit Pen. A lot of the bosses coming in now in guild raids have like a little bit of spirit, a little bit of defense, stuff like that. So that's pretty good for her. Resnick, it's really like in the grand scheme of like MA2s, that's super weak. So
Yes.
I think this is like a reel this character in. She's been way too good kind of move by Gumi.
I agree.
I mean, it's fine. Like, she's already used in the meta. It's good in the meta. So, any little bit helps. But when you think about like prolonging the life of a character, this is a move, I think, by Gumi to, okay, we need to do something to make this unit a little bit less powerful in the grand scheme. Unfortunately, they didn't do the same thing with Skahal because
Yeah, no,
I'm
no.
gonna keep beating that dead horse because Gooby, what are you doing?
I have no idea. But yeah, no, the thing with Resonance, 'cause I've said this about kill phase, giving characters defense and spirit is kind of like an old school way and kind of outdated how to improve their survivability because there's so much penetration now that, sure, maybe a year ago, extra defense and spirit was certainly nice, but nowadays it quickly diminishes in value. But Resnick is one of those characters, when I'm doing some common builds, she's quite frequently up in the 40s for defense and the 20s to 30s for spirit. So, when you talk about giving an extra 10 on each of those, I think it's sizable for support. Maybe just not against those top tier newer units, but the broad scheme of the game, I think that's still some big advantages over the other supports, where I don't think most supports get anywhere near as tanky as she does. I think Velis might be the lone exception for like tankiness compared to Resnick. All right, well, we also have some +6 equipment, and I think a lot of these are kind of meh. The White Cape and the Rune Staff, we don't have much to say. The Evil Bane Pendant's getting some extra Demon Killer for the PvE content. It's really the new reliquiaries that are coming, and we're getting a staff and a book here. So the staff is the Wizard Rod here. Yeah, go ahead.
This staff is insane.
It's
Getting
awesome.
the 20 CT ability that we've seen on some of the other units recently, and get the 20 magic attack, really high base stat for magic, and then obviously this becomes like an excellent PvE item with the max damage cap up 2,000 on there as well.
Definitely.
So this is going right on to Dark Fina, I think, and my Dark team, and anybody else that can use it. To be honest, this is a great pickup.
I would agree. This is a very competitive, if not best in slot upgrade for many staff users. There's obviously some elements that have staffs that are catered to them that may be a little harder decision. I obviously think of something like the Prunus Lamina where you really have to pick and choose. Yeah, you get that max damage cap increase, but at the same time, I think that one with the modifiers likely ends up being more damage overall. But if Skahal is hitting damage cap anyway, you might as well give him this. He might still be able to hit damage cap. So overall, great unit, great equipment increase. And they're
I
also
think it should be limited to one time per battle.
Yes, the CT. That's correct.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not like Skahal's gonna keep getting the 200 CT every time Resnick heals him.
No. Thank goodness. But yes, only one time. But I still think that is a super valid. We've seen that be a really important game changer mid fight. And then the other one is the Necrocomicon. The book essentially. This is a very good book in my opinion. There's 4 effects here that I think are all really awesome. Do you have any thoughts on this initially either?
This is another one that becomes like a best in slot for most book users too. Like even though like a few of them have like books catered towards them, like these effects are super nice. Element debuff resistance 50%. You got a human killer on there. Got cast time down. That's that's even more than you can get on the Trust Stone, I believe. Right?
It is. That's why it's super noteworthy. And I've done a huge deep dive on like the Sage Staff 250 decreased skill activation time, and it's not all characters, but there are some characters where that extra 50 is a breakpoint. So that is a big increase for the book users.
And then the magic increase as well, just like the Genji gloves. So amazing item.
Yep. And I'm fairly certain the way they have this phrase, because I think I've seen this with other pieces of equipment, the way they have this phrase that it's debuff res for all elements, I am 99% positive that stacks with the Trust Stone 25 all element debuff res. I'm fairly certain, but I'd have to double check that. There's slight wording differences sometimes. I can't remember what the last piece of equipment was, but it ended up stacking together. So I will end up testing that for sure.
That would be crazy if it does stack.
Yeah, definitely. I'd finally get some use out of that Trust Zone passive. So good, and that's it for the +6 in equipment. A couple of miscellaneous things here. We are getting a raid boss this week for Addison Ray's collaboration, and we're getting an item for her, the cell phone. I think the super interesting thing here is that it's an accessory. We had the data mine that she was getting some extra items. The cell phone was one of them. I was like 95% positive it was going to be a type of weapon, but I do know I think they might be having a glove as well. There was a second item. I just don't think it's been officially released yet. But the fact that it's a cell phone, I'm super hyped for, at least based off the precedent of what they did for Full Metal with their items, that those items significantly change those characters. If they do something similar for the cell phone, she's already damn good. I'm really surprised or really intrigued to see what they do with this.
Yeah, I think that when we complete the story for Addison, we're going to get an EX stage, and then we'll get the glove. But I'm thinking that each of these 2 items is going to have like 3 unique passives for her. So that's going to significantly boost, I mean, it obviously depends what they are.
Right.
What would you like to see on the cell phone? Like, what are some kind of wish list items for passives?
I think I'd like to see at minimum a little bit of AoE res or unit res, one or the other. Probably AoE res, just generally speaking. I'd probably like to just see some smaller modifiers, and I'd get nothing crazy. She's so good right now. I don't know what you could give her that would really like be balanced and extra. So maybe something just like some light attack, maybe a couple agility points if they want to go from the stat perspective to say give a special kind of stat. The only other thing maybe is some kind of, it sounds ridiculous, but cast time down. She does have a sub job that has some curative potential that has, cast time on it. She had none of the kit. I think it'd be really, I don't know, big brain if they decided to take that approach to really make sure all of her sub jobs had a time and place. But because right now I do use her on the red mage sub, and that cura takes forever sometimes for her to
Yeah.
cast. So like, yeah, I would even something like healing power. If they went healing power 10, just something weird. I don't know what else you could put on there, to be honest. That'd be balanced. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I want them to be more like utility based rather than like her damage is already very good. I mean, whatever. If they want to throw human killer or light attack, that's fine. I'll take it. But I do hope that they're more utility based, like the healing power.
Right.
The cast time is a good one.
Yep.
Stuff like that, or defensive focus, because she is a little bit of a, her survivability isn't great other than kind of these statuses she throws up.
That's correct. Yeah. Either way, should be interesting to see what happens there. And we are getting a couple other noteworthy things just to throw away as mentions here. It's a big 7-year anniversary for FFBE, so they're doing a 7 times medal drop, which is going to apply to, I couldn't even tell you the amount of content. It's basically everything from what I can tell, like arena medals and drops and who knows what. So either way, good week to farm. Definitely keep in the loop of that.
I love the arena medals for sure.
Yeah.
It's gonna. I'm still pretty far away from my Sage's staff, but any little bit helps.
Oh yeah, those are gold. You have to max all your potions for the week if you're going for that. You just can't get that in the regular week. It's a huge difference. And then bingo boards coming back for global exclusive units, which I almost did a double take when I was trying to read the notice. The fact that they brought the bingo boards back, I thought we were getting some MA2s for some of these characters or dream upgrades for some of them, and that's not the case. They're just being really nice, bringing back some bingo boards. So those who are pulling those units.
Yeah, that kind of had my eyebrow raised too. I wonder if they're gonna throw out like a special banner this week for those units. It's kind of weird that they would bring the bingo board and not the units. So that's,
yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know either. Yeah, we'll find out what they do. And last note, which is interesting, quick match is still disabled. So there was a problem with the map, something to do with the heights being ignored. Essentially, characters were being able to jump over places they shouldn't and attack through things they shouldn't. I'm a little let down they disabled it, but we got some compensation. I'm sure they'll probably run it on a whim whenever it's fixed.
Yeah, it was the player 2 side. One of the walls was coded as a height 0 when it should have been a height 4. So they could just keen blade and walk out and have the advantage.
Yep.
It's super disappointing because I was going to be able to hit Diamond Master, and it would have been just enough that I could finish my plat armor. They announced some compensation, which is 2,000 medals. So I'm really missing out on that recipe I was going to get from ranking up.
Yep. Maybe next week.
Sucks.
I mean, I doubt it, but if they're working on a fix, they're working on a fix. So we'll see what happens. Good. All right. Well, that's all we had for some of the updates. We wanted to get through those quickly because, like you saw, we have some other good topics here. The next one here from the War Room, where we talk more about meta snapshots and whatnot. We want to talk a little bit about 70 cost and just conceptually, impact on metas and whatnot. I know I had a vast amount of trouble last week quantifying my Valentine Miranda review because obviously statistically and utility and kit and literally everything, they're inferior to potentially 3 different other levels of characters being 70 cost units. I don't know. Do you have any specific thoughts on where the game, what they should do with them at this time, or is that a thing that should go away?
I don't think that they should go away. I think that they should continue to lean into the cost limited content. I think that's, those are modes that people really enjoy, and keep them on a monthly cadence. I think it was better when class match was monthly. So there's a lot of us that have wanted them to go back to that monthly schedule, or like I said in the past, add a manual option to quick pick and then maybe make that cost limited as well. Might make that even more interesting than it is today.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that Gumi really needs to do with those cost 70 units is they absolutely need to balance it among the elements, because water doesn't have one, fire doesn't have one. Who else doesn't have one? Lightning, maybe?
I don't know. That's a good question. They might not. You're right.
I know that wind has a couple, dark now has a couple, light has several.
No, lightning does not have a cost 70. That's a great call out.
Earth does have one. They have Eileen. but
Good Lord. Yeah, do something about that.
they could use another one.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of in the opinion now that I feel like they shouldn't balance or change any balancings for cost 70. I think at this point it should be a resource advantage for cost 70. So I think Gumi did a good thing with the 18k guaranteed banner last week for them, where if you typically consider what a pit, now they had lower rates on that banner, so I think that's kind of crappy. You should have equal rates on that. But I like the idea that if something is cost 70, it should be much cheaper to acquire because the upside usage is not nearly the same as the other units. So yeah, if you're considering full pity being at that 40 something k and you can get her guaranteed for 18k, I think that's like step one in the right direction. I think step two would be a cheaper reincarnation cost, to be honest, where we see that with the MR units. I made this point in my presentation. One of the huge demerits against her as the game goes on, no one will ever, unless you're doing this outside the norm. And someone on the subreddit did. They max reincarnated Miranda day one, but that's unique. There's no reason to ever max reincarnate a 70 cost unit. So not only are they statistically inferior to all the other URs, but that gap is going to be significantly wider to the max reincarnated URs. So from that perspective, either make their reincarnation cheaper to entice people to do it, or make the resources more abundant, or something. But I don't know how you can justify a 70 cost unit when you keep rolling out the hundreds.
I agree. I think on that same notes, they should do the same for the older units as well, like cost 80s, make them cheaper to reincarnate so that, these resources are so expensive and so rare at the moment that, we've talked about it.
Yeah.
You really only want to be very selective with how you're divvying those out if you do it at all. So
right.
It would be nice to kind of dive into some of those older favorites, like we have been with some of the MR units and SR units, and be able to revisit and play with those units, because the stats do make a difference in how competitive they can be. So, some of those cost 80s could become a lot more compelling if you were able to do it.
Most definitely. Yeah, I agree. So good. Well, all right. That's all I really wanted to say. It's just kind of an unfortunate spot for them to be in, and I'm sure Gumi knows that too. They have enough data to back that up. But regardless, we'll see if they end up making any changes. It doesn't sound like it from the JP roadmap, so I'd keep my hopes low for now. All right, well, so the Leonis Spy report then, just because, we're in limited Guild Wars, so not a lot of meta snapshots at the moment outside of that. But looking ahead to JP, we did get Leela the Bold's Transcendence upgrade here, and we're getting her MA2 this week. And recapping what that looks like for everyone. So her MA2, they're essentially giving her 10 AoE res, 15 healing power, and that's what we're getting this week. And then in the future, 10% slash and strike res, 30% acquired AP, and they're upgrading her 120 ability here to be a select 2, in addition to that dispel, protect, and the decreased healing power of 70. So nice big ability upgrade there. When we talk about Leela and that transcendence to MA2, what do you think about balance wise? Is that enough to bring her back into the conversation for things?
I think that she can be very good. Yeah, her stats to begin with, she was like one of the better statted characters in the game. Like very solid agility, very solid luck, nice HP, good attack value. Like across the board, very very good stats. And that's kind of what they have leaned into, I think, with both upgrades, essentially, is just kind of giving her more stats to play with. They really, AoE resistance, that's going to help her survivability a little bit, kind of help her come a little bit closer to what some modern damage dealers are getting. But she's relatively tanky, like she has good resistances, especially they've kind of leaned into that strike resistance niche for her. So she's going to be at like 30% strike resistance.
Correct.
So there's not a lot of units really, outside of Raph who is coming that deal really well with strike damage. And Leela is actually on Raph's vision card, the Great Demon as well. So that I think is something that some players are probably looking into in JP at this point. And the strike resistance penetration is starting to get amped up with Alaya, but
right.
When you have so much base that you can add on to with vision cards, you're going to be able to cut into that damage still quite significantly. So
yeah,
I think that's kind of her angle, is that she has that strike res.
I agree. Yeah, here's the thing. This is where I'm at for that team. Raph seems like an automatic must, obviously. Sephiroth also seems like an automatic must. That third character does seem to be a toss-up. For a well-balanced team, typically want to go for a magic unit. It's not always the case, though, but theoretically, Dark Vina fills that third. We on Global have Dwayne, so that's a whole different conversation. You might even see Dwayne run as that third unit, have him be pure DPS and the Raft. Like, there's a bunch of options there. I think the interesting angle that I would take with Leela, though, she's just kind of, although slash damage is not polar opposite, but very antithesis to what Sephiroth is. And I would imagine that as time goes on, there's going to be things to get away from what Seth does. He's not that he's unbeatable, but like you can beat him decently easy now. We've gone around that where he's very AoE heavy in what he does for damage. We know he's very, penetration based, so there's other ways to get around it. I don't think it's impossible to kill him, but there's a couple things that Leela does that he doesn't, which I think is really interesting. One of them is that strike res niche. Sephiroth's technically weak to them. She's got a real big edge on him from that strength. The second thing is that she has a dispel in her kit. He's got no dispel. Neither does most dark units other than Dark Phoenix Limit Break. So that's still a super valuable thing to give out here. We've seen that go away as of late. I know that's going to have a time when it comes back. The other thing is that on that 120 ability, it's Dispel Protect, which he does not have access to other than the Soldier sub job. So you're talking about maybe using 2 abilities in a row to achieve that. The decreased healing power, there was another piece of utility that she has that he does not. And hers is sizable at 70. It used to be only hitting 1 unit, but now to hit 2 units for 70 healing power down and to be unit scaling, where I just mentioned Sephiroth, it's very AoE heavy. I just feel like it's a totally different thing, totally different character that it's not better or worse. But if you're meta tuning for Sephiroth teams, you can kind of get into a pretty easy rhythm of what to build. And Leela would just throw an absolute wrench in that.
I think that she's like one of the best units against like Wall and exactly what he does. Like the healing power in specific, 70 healing power debuff really is going to shut down his healing completely.
And Warrior of Light is the for
Warrior of Light.
Yep. Totally.
Did I say a different?
You said Wall. I just don't know if everyone knows who Wall would be.
But then also that dispel attack completely gets rid of his hate as well.
Yes.
So
right, Brave Presence is gone, and then technically his limit break, he gives himself Protect and Shell, so you can dispel that Protect here. Warrior of Light is extremely good right now. He's almost a staple in beating Dark, where there's not much they can do to kind of take that away from him, particularly with Addison, right? That I've been doing, that double heal back and the courage, like forget about it. But yeah, I won't say she's amazing. I just think this is a good upgrade, and she fills a hole that Dark doesn't currently have.
She's a good tool in the tool belt, I think.
Yeah.
For sure.
What do you think about Dark versus Light, though, considering now she's getting this upgrade and maybe coming back into the fray? We're, in my opinion, very different right now from JP, just for the Dwayne upgrade, but I think he might have just gotten his this week in JP as well. I just didn't look close enough to know if it's the same, and I would imagine it is, but they don't have his vision card, which is a major piece of him, in my opinion, that he's got the courage move on that ability and a whole bunch of stuff. So, what do you think about Light versus Dark overall?
At this point, my Addison race still isn't built up. I'm waiting for the free shards to come in. But in my mind, I feel like that completely reshapes the picture of Dark versus Light, because she specifically targets a huge weakness of Dark, which is magic.
Yep.
Even Raph coming in, she's okay against magic. She's pretty good, but it's not her strength. It's much more on the physical side is kind of her best strength. So yeah, I think Addison is to be determined. How that's going to the early returns seem very solid for Light. So
yeah.
Especially with Bart's coming in, who was already doing a pretty good job of at least having some counterplay against the Dark meta team, the Raph, Seth, Dark Fina.
Yep.
I think that a lot of people in JP were still walling that even post Bart's, because none of the other elements in the game could really deal with it.
Exactly.
And you have to build a very kind of specific Light build in order to counter it. And if somebody else decides not to wall Dark that day, then you're kind of screwed. So maybe Addison allows Light not to have to go hyper niche, anti-Dark build and still be able to beat them.
Yep.
It's possible. We'll have to kind of see. So yeah, I think that's kind of where my mind is at.
Same. I think Addison is the biggest X factor to that, and unfortunately not everyone is able to max her. That's super expensive to do. But the other point that I think is a really good one to bring up is the nullifies sure hit on her buff and what that does for Elena and Locke's relevancy, that they're basically unplayable to a degree. Now you could go hyper dark res on your Elena and kind of nerf her evasion. I've seen some people attempt that. It works actually half decently. That, if you can mitigate 80% dark res, who cares if they hit you? It's still not a lot of damage, but that's not how she's meant to be built. Then you basically neuter her against all other elements. She becomes basically useless, where the dark res means nothing. It's not an evade unit, so that's very risky. It's just not a safe build. So I do think Addison does a good job with that. I do think Dark is probably on average still the strongest of the two, most particularly here, even because of the Dwayne card. Just the fact that he's also got that courage removal, the re-raise removal, the 38% dark imperil, the slash res imperil. I've come to really appreciate the imperils post 3rd anniversary, where a lot of characters, there's a lot of penetration, not as many imperils. And so to really get those hyper high damage, you need an imperil somewhere, and Dwayne's really good at that. And again, we don't have a strong strike meta here, so even him hit with his strike weakness, I don't think is a big demerit. But yeah, I don't know. I think Dark has the edge, but Light is certainly very competitive.
I mean, that was the reason why he was always good, is because of the crazy utility that he has in his
Right.
kit, and then they just made it even better with the vision card. I'm like, hey, here's some courage removal too.
Right. I didn't mention the disable, that AoE disable, destroy a fight immediately. You know, like there's lots of good things.
100%.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, there's lots to look forward to there. And
I will say before we move on, I know that you've said that. I mean, if you were trying to like rush Addison, I think it's expensive. To be continued though, because this raid coming in, there's a bunch of tickets that we're going to get to be able to pull some shards. There's the social media campaign. At the live stream, they said there's another 50. So I feel like we're gonna be seeing a few hundred shards here, between all that stuff here, like in the next couple of weeks.
right.
Not to mention whatever, maybe there's a bonus for completing the story or completing the EX or what have you. So yeah, I think we'll probably be able to get her up, maybe to max limit burst for free. Pretty close to it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm okay with that. And I'm cool taking the extra shard. She is one of the few units I was ready to reincarnate. So even though I maxed her, I'm like, yeah, I'll take shards. I'll reincarnate her for sure.
Number one fan.
Yeah. They made it too good. Well, how can I not be? It's cake. I'm clearing 6-0 on fire teams like nothing. That my light team can beat every iteration of Dark, whether it's Bowtie or not Bowtie, Fina or not Fina, someone else. Slot 1, slot 2, literally doesn't matter. That light team beats every iteration of Dark. Beats Earth, beats Wind. It's crazy. It's amazing. All right. Well, on that note, we do have some good Q&A here. So question number 1, and this is kind of something we touched upon on last week. What do we think of the new toggle ability to turn off unit affinity that's released in JP? What impact will it have for auto PvP? And I'm sure PvE is in this convo too, but yeah, what are your initial thoughts on that toggle?
It's interesting. I think that's, any additional control that you can put into the hands of like min-maxers will find a way to do something with it. I do like that it's kind of per unit that you can turn this on or off. I think that's a key factor. I think that especially for ranged units, I think this could be helpful for them, because them especially, like, they have that dex and usually maybe sometimes even agility tied into their skill bonuses. So they're always looking to move ahead and get towards another unit. And that is to their detriment, because then they get into AoE range and we know what happens after that. So
right.
Yeah, I think specifically for the range units, that's the biggest one. I don't think that I'll turn it off for anyone else.
100% agreed. And yeah, there's almost no scenarios in which getting rid of that unit affinity is a good thing. That agility buff alone, that 5 or 6 extra agility points, is huge for luck and dexterity, not only for accuracy but for evade units. Absolutely enormous. Helps that crit evade. Basically, like, a bunch of stats are influenced. So that's basically directly nerfing your team by turning that off. I do think that for, as you mentioned, those range units, it's probably the best upside, where if they're supposed to be by themselves theoretically anyway, kind of on the back line, they're not usually ones to really benefit from a ton of unit affinities. So I like the idea you can turn that off. I do think this probably has the most upside for PvE content, though. I know this tends to be a real big issue with some people in terms of turn order, where you put 2 people close to each other and all of a sudden you have to consider the affinity, and that can throw things off for what your rotation is. I think that is where the min-maxing is really going to come in, but for auto PvP, you hit the nail on the head. So yeah, either way, looking forward to it. It's a good toggle to have on and off. So the second question here isn't really a question. This is something we came up with that we wanted to talk about. But the question, if I had to phrase it a certain way, I would think it'd be like, do we like it? Do we want more of it? What do we think of the current War of the Visions meetups? This, for those of you that don't know, just occurred California this last week, where people were selected and you had to apply to join. I think there was a limit of 100 people. There was a special presentation. They got to go out to lunch and like dinner and meet up. So there's a great fan event. You got accepted but couldn't make it, unfortunately.
I did. I was excited about it when they first announced it, because I've been waiting for something, one of these fan meets. And yeah, my first feedback for Gumi, if anybody out there is listening, is, it was just too short notice for most people. And then, it was just the selection process then even made it even less notice to be able to kind of try to book tickets for people who were trying to come from out of town. So that's kind of what happened to me at the point where I was accepted. There was only a few weeks until the event, and plane tickets and lodging and whatnot, it was just more than I was willing to spend for like a couple hour events. So
yep.
I hope that Gumi is going to do more of these, and maybe a bigger event where they can bring in more people. So yeah, I'll look forward to that. Maybe for our next anniversary or something.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's same. I think particularly the selection process being as late as it was is the biggest thing. I feel like they did like a month and a half, ahead of time. I don't think that's the worst. I think that's kind of right on the edge of what's acceptable. But I know even after they announced it, it took a couple weeks to get the acceptance, which at that point, yeah, definitely way too last minute. And I obviously love the ideas. I think it's a great idea to bring the community together. I would take this one step further almost that I actually don't even want them to necessarily be War Division specific. One of the biggest things that I've noticed in the con community by and large, KupoCon, there's which is a Final Fantasy 14 oriented one, but many of them, you have different anime conventions and whatnot, and video game conventions. I never see war divisions anywhere, even at Final Fantasy specific events. Like literally nothing. I could go cosplay as Leonis and no one would know who I was. So like I think that to what Gumi should do strategically, there's a lot of events here. Whether it's setting up a couple booths, having a mini event, having a panel, having a something, any opportunity to advertise and be like, hey, if you guys are in this convention area, and cons are all over the place, they're in Boston, they're in Houston, they're in California, like you can geographically reach a wider audience. I feel like tapping into some of those is a huge missed opportunity, not only for the fan meetup, but for the exposure of the game, where if you're having trouble attracting fans, I feel like that's a really good social interactive way to kind of bring some visibility, because I don't think there's any visibility right now in the Final Fantasy community to this mobile game. Like I just don't think there is. All right, well, regardless, we'll see if they take us up on that. The last thing we're going to do here is kind of a Q&A. There was a nice little debate going on in R&J's server earlier about the Warrior of the Crystal units and how good they are, how not good they are, who's trash, who's not. And so we thought, at one of the recommendations, to do a tier list of all the Warriors of the Crystals, particularly with Transcendences. So kind of looking at what their maxed endgame state is supposed to be. So yeah, so we're going to do a really generic ranking here of the tier list, S, A, B, and C. I don't think anyone here is below a C unit ranking. And again, when I think of these grades, I think of them in the total scheme of the game, all UR units, not meta UR units. So there's a much wider pool to rank from. And yeah, I'm sorry, JB just brought up a good point. Let's add some extra context to this. We're going to attempt to rank them in the total scheme of all URs, not just amongst them individually. At the end of this, it's the same thing. You'll see them all relative to each other, but really across all URs. And I would imagine more of an emphasis on auto PvP, but I think there's a case to be made for manual and PvE content as well. It just depends on how prevalent and how impactful it is, but I don't want to completely ignore that. But I just know that's like 20% of the way we typically look at character value. So yeah. Do you want to start off with any of these 12 in particular, or?
So why don't we start off with the original, the OG. He's got to be an S tier, I think.
Oh, interesting. I don't know. I didn't think I was going to go that high, but I'll start there.
And let me make the case. You get the free obviously you get him free to 140. You get the free Transcendence. His stats are crazy good. I mean, just to begin with, like he was pretty much like a 90 cost unit. I think it makes him comparable to a lot of 100 cost units, assuming they're unreincarnated. His kit is super good. He's a great PvE unit. I think that really the only thing that he's missing is some sort of accuracy and maybe like a secondary survival mechanic. I think like if you're factoring costs like into the discussion as well, I would definitely have him as an S tier.
I'll give you that. Can I pitch this a different way just so we also make sure that I'm thinking of this the same way? When I think of an S tier units out of all UR units, right? I'm thinking like Sephiroth, Bradley, Wingstern. Well, I know I gave him a bad character review grade. Sorry, guys. But like characters that are very high meta characters. Do you think Lucio was in that conversation with the Sephiroths and the Bradleys?
I do not. So, I mean, if you're putting it that way, I wouldn't put him as S. I would put him as A. But just like when I'm thinking about like all factors, it's hard not for me to think of him as like one of the better characters in the game, I would say.
I'll give you that. I'll totally level with that. Let me keep him on the edge here like I normally do. We'll revisit that because I agree, particularly because you have to take into the context the reincarnation stats, which you brought up. I just don't think I see the prevalent usage that I would expect from an S tier unit, but
that's fair.
There's no reason not to. He's got all the check marks.
Yeah, he's not Sephiroth. He's not Bradley. 100%.
Right. And even then, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's only a couple S tiers. But I consider S tiers people that really like drive. They're the benchmark, right? When I do my characters reviews, or when you do your character reviews, do you talk about Lucio as the benchmark for them? Like, I don't think so.
If cost is a factor, I probably would. But
yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, if we're throwing that out the window, then yeah, I would probably put him in the A tier.
Yeah. All right. I'll tentatively. I don't think cost influences this. It's a special asterisk for sure, but I think from a tier list, my when someone looks at this at the end of the day, they can't see the cost justifications in that ranking.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. How about Jumir, though? Second one to come up. Screw it. We'll just go down the list here individually. What are you thinking for Jum?
I think she'd be on the line for me, like between A and S.
I'd go through there. Yeah.
I don't. She's definitely like a step down from when she was first released. Like if we're talking a year ago, like back when she was new, definite S tier. Like she changed the game. She put wind on the map again, put him as a meta element.
Mm-hmm.
She's suffered a little bit from the status removal kind of counterplay that's been implemented in the game with barrier and protect and shell removal, dispels and things of that nature. So yeah, I think that's maybe skirting the line.
Put her
there.
down. Well, think of it. Let me this way. I would approach it. Is she in your top 5 tanks in the game or top 3 tanks? I'm trying to think of that mental list. I think she probably is for me still. If I had to, yeah.
But if we're considering like Dialdo and Raf in the list too, I think she's moving down.
You're right. Yep, they're the bar. I'll go through there. I'll give her an A. I was on the fence for S, but you bring a really good point. By the time we get to the bottom of this tier list, that's not going to be the same. Yep, I think that's fair. Okay, all right. We can always revisit. What do you think about CTA here?
It's tough. I love this unit. I was so hyped for her. She's a B for me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was almost tempted to even go C, if for no other reason that if I think of the top tier missile units in the game, she's not the first name that comes to mind. And I won't call her an average missile unit, but I think she's more average than I think she is. Where if you think of the total list of missile units, you have some like really poor ones. But if I think of like what's an average missile unit, it's probably, oh shoot, I don't even know, Fred. I don't want to put CT on the same level as Fred, but I'm okay leaving her B for now. But I would almost even go so far as to go C. I'll level you there. I think that's that's fair for now.
Because like I mean, at this point, like Alaya and Eliza, they're still S tier for me. Like I think they've fallen into A, like in post 3.5-year anniversary. Obviously, they're still great, but they're not what they were, at the end of last year.
Yep.
So, and I put Cetia just a rung, I would, below those two. So if they're A for me, I would have her as a B tier.
And I'm going to agree with you here because we'll come back to why. But I think B is a good grade, and we'll see why soon. So, all right. What are we thinking about Renan, the ever controversial, sometimes good, sometimes bad?
He was like C or D tier when he was released.
Oh yeah.
He's been helped in a big way, from various upgrades. I would give him maybe a B, maybe
yeah.
You could convince me to go higher if you felt that way, but
no, I think B. And here's the only problem I have with it is that I don't have enough data on Renan. Not enough people pulled for him, and I haven't done enough testing. One of my favorite things about him is that he is on the Alphonse card. He, Resnick, and Al are all on that full metal agility and unit res card. So many people still use Skahala for good reasons as that third unit, not fully taking in that vision card synergy. And I think it's only because not enough people have Renan to actually do anything with, and they never invested in him and don't really care to research him. I think he's probably better than we think he is, but I think B is fair. If he was that much better, I think you'd see him. But then again, maybe not. If no one's pulling for him, you wouldn't see him. You know what I mean? He's so old now. No one's pulling on the rerun banners for him. There's no reason to rush his build. I doubt people are putting him in the barracks. So even then, I think that's not a good reason why he's here, but I think he's better than we think he is.
That's another kind of feedback point for Gumi is that why are these older Warriors of the Crystals so hard to attain at this point?
Yep.
It doesn't even make any sense.
No, they're not significantly better than their counterparts. They're par for the course for 100 cost units. The regular 100 cost units are better than in many cases. Yeah. All right, so this is a good list so far. I think most people would agree with this. I'm gonna tentatively, I think, throw Velas in the S. Is that a decent starting spot?
I think so. I was going to start off with S for him.
Yeah.
He's maintained his position as, top of the line support unit.
Yep.
And can splash into, outside of his element, which is kind of one of his best assets. He's good no matter what team you put him in. So
definitely. Yep. No, and I did my video earlier today, like, should you reincarnate supports? I won't get into that now, but a short answer, if I had to, he's the top number one for me that I would. I think there's a valid case. I think he's that good why you might look to reincarnate him. Obviously, haste is not as overpowering as it used to be, and his healing is kind of limited to those 3 burst AoEs. After that, it falls off pretty significantly to the arithmetician heals, but man, he's still got some great, that 38% ice and peril. He's got a guaranteed hit, got his barrier, protect and shell, just a ridiculous amount of AoE resistance. Overall, yeah, aging very well with the game.
Yeah, you kind of get scared when he's run out of heals and you're on the other team and you see him start throwing out a cast because he can definitely do some damage when his AI allows it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And well, and right now, if I think of like Reagan Howlet, I'm saying I'm making a new ice team. Velas is the third for me if I'm making that ice team. You know, it wouldn't even be a tank. Let those two be tanky enough. Velas will heal them. Game over. You know, that's kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, it's very
So
solid.
cool. All right. Probably next, I would say one of the most controversial ones we might have of the night. There's a huge, I think, grading of how people feel about Astrius. Do you want to start? Or do you want me to start? I don't even.
Why don't you start? What do you think?
This is going to be wild. I'm going to go. Oh God, it kills me. I'm going to go B here for him, if only because he's so hyper reliant on his courage to be a good unit. I don't know if that's a good thing to be that reliant on it. His cross destruction ability is good, but the fact that he can't use his main teammate buff reliably on most maps, he's still one of the most well-rounded units, but I don't think he's significantly more impactful than either Cetia or Renan. I think it's debatable if you make a water team of 3 if he fits in there, because you have Celeste and Perrine and Amnelis, and you could go ice units because you have that crossover of the elements, that I think he isn't on the Joom Lucio level in terms of being a staple of that element.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason I also consider Lucio an A is because he is an incredible PvE unit,
Yes.
whereas Astrius is just an okay PvE unit. Like he's not at top of the tier, not something you're gonna have on your guild raid team unless you have to. There's other options.
Mm-hmm. It's tough. It's a
So
tough one.
yeah, I mean, I think from like a PvP perspective right now, a lot of people were hyped about his upgrades, but I haven't seen people really diving in and using him that much.
No.
Even after Celis is getting her upgrades, I do like the upgrades that he's got, but like you said, it is very courage dependent with the element resist and that stuff.
Right.
I feel like he's still better than Setia and Ranan just because of like the fire evade angle that he's very solid against it. But I wouldn't go so far as to put him into 8.
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the middle.
I agree. And even the fire evade, I've had issues with him beating that, to be honest. He's super reliant on that guaranteed hit. He does get some of that accuracy, but oftentimes that still isn't enough. There's still a lot of there's enough RNG that it's not a sure thing. And even that guaranteed hit, talk about Yuffie, she can evade that for a couple turns. So I thought he was going to be better against that, and I don't think he is, unfortunately. I can see the case for an A though. I'll put him kind of toward the middle here because I agree it hurts to put him next to CT and Renan, but at the same time, I don't see him anywhere. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that being said, I don't see water anywhere either. But even the water that I do see, he's not in every single team. If I see if I see wind, Joom's in like 90% of those teams.
Yeah.
And
I think
yeah,
I think right in between is good for him.
yeah. Well, yeah, I like that for now. And on that water topic, I might start Perrine at S. Quite honestly.
I was going to say S too. I think that she's an incredible unit.
Yeah.
I thought that she was good, when I first looked at her, like, in my previews, but she's turned out to be even better than I expected. Really, the only thing that kind of slows her down is a barrier. So if you can have somebody to deal with that on your team, like she's good to go.
Yeah.
She's like, when you think about the kind of the strike meta team, I feel like she is the most scary one out of the 3. Like Edward obviously is amazing too, like, and he can do a ton of damage, but that vortex kick just completely deletes people. So
It's awesome.
and then obviously subjugated fist is another one that just one shots people too. So
Yep.
I put her right up there. Maybe not quite as good as Bradley or Sephiroth. Maybe just a little bit below them, but not by much.
I agree. And obviously, at the end of the day, this S tier is not going to be exactly the same as Bradley, but that's the relative top end of the game here. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, just so much. We're not even talking about the haste on her limit break and the CT up on some of those basic attacks. She has aged exceptionally well and just continues to get better.
Great in PvE too. She has got
Awesome.
a three hit strike attack. So
Yep, most definitely. So, all right, next unit here, Rugia. This is why I kept CT at B, because in my heart, I could not. I'm going to put him in C, because I know you're probably going to put him there. In my heart, I could not put her next to him at C. So he was the deciding factor why I bumped her up a grade here. He's better than I think people think he is. He's still really not great.
it's so tough because I spent so much viz getting this character and I was hyped for him, and yeah, I agree that he's better than people give him credit for, and he's definitely usable and he's viable. You can do stuff with him. There's just a lot of better options, I think, even within Earth maybe. I don't know. What
It's
do you think is the best three-person Earth team right now?
I mean, I think the most well-rounded one is Bradley, Moshiri, and UR's Zazan. I don't think there's a good way to beat that team because you have to gear for accuracy and AoE res and magic resistance. You need re-raise to spell, courage to spell. Like, there's just too much. For all three of those characters, and obviously you get into some CT shenanigans. And it's just tough to build a team that does all three. But I do think there's a case where I think Moshiri is kind of overrated in that she is just kind of a re-raise one trick, and without that, she's kind of nothing. Her limit break is awesome, but there's a lot of other ways to still do damage. I do think Rugia is a nice maybe counter pick to sub in for her, where he has that regen ability to give to teammates and just does something different with the spacing. What I find with Moshiri is that if my Earth team loses, she's like one of the first to die. And it's because you need to do weird things there. You got to put bow tie on her, and her teammate buff isn't always applicable. And you're just kind of forcing a square peg into a round hole with her, I think, sometimes because you have to. And I think Rugia's got a solid case. The thing with him, though, is literally just he's got this anti-evasion niche. And where that falls short is that there's plenty of teams that can deal with evasion right now. Sort of the length you say, oh, I have to pull Rugia and use him so I can beat evade teams. Like, no, you can beat evade teams lots of other ways. The lack of defense pen is concerning. And, I do think he's still a really good Skahal counter, quite honestly, because he's got that follow-up hit. He can take magic damage really well. He can kind of outrange him a little bit. So for those that are struggling with Skahal, I still like Rugia a lot from that. And obviously Skahal doesn't have defense, so the defense pen is relevant. But man, yeah, you talk about...
I think that's his best angle. Like that's where he can defeat Skahal like better than pretty much anybody in the game.
I would agree. Yep.
So that's and there's plenty of Skahal walls out there. So I mean, it's not bad when those come up. But yeah, I think that there's better out there.
Yep. Yeah, I always have to dock people a couple grades if they're niche, because if I can't use you 50% of the time, then you're just not as good as the other units that I can. Good. All right. Probably our next one that may be a tough decision. What do we think about Resol here?
This was another one that was a little bit disappointing for me. I was really hyped for her as well. And she's another one that's got like kind of the anti-evade angle. That's kind of, what I think a lot of her strength is. She's got very, very accurate units. She's got the Select 2, with the Imperil on it, which is very nice. She's got a little bit of bulk and sustain. I think that she is probably around the same, area of the chart as Astrius for me. I think probably right around there.
I'm with you.
I don't know if I would quite put her into an A tier.
No.
Because, even on a win team, I don't think that she's necessarily the best option. Like, I feel like Glassy is just as good, if not better, at 120.
Yep.
And then obviously Edward is the third, so.
Most definitely. Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I really don't have much to add, unfortunately. I think there's a lot of good things to like. I think she's a fantastic unit. She doesn't move the needle enough that some of these other characters do. Yeah, I think that's a fair middle grade where, same as Astrius, really good. Not as bad, quote in quotes, as CT as Renan, but not nearly as good as Jum and Lucio. What do we think about Vega here? This would be an interesting discussion to have.
So I did finally get him up to 140 about a week ago, and I've been using him exclusively in Arena for the last 2 weeks, and he's been a little bit disappointing. Like his damage is good. That's expected. Like his modifiers are good. He's got a lot of attack and got good penetrations and things, but I don't know. He just doesn't have good survivability. It's really disappointing actually, because I thought he was going to be a very good bruiser.
Yeah, it's great.
I think I would put him as a B.
I'm with you. I would even accept a C. I really would. I'm so down on him. I've done a ton of testing with Arena. It actually is like shocking to my core on my character spreadsheet. The effective HP that I do, he is literally the highest effective HP in the game as DPS. But the lack of that area resistance is just a lethal killer in a way that takes her damage. And I really mean this. I think re-raising courage as your pure survivability metric is a poor design. It's fine. His is not good enough.
Very good into strike teams. That's something he can do. But yeah, he doesn't have the survivability against like the top tier slash damage right now.
No. I think this will change with Bridal Elia. I would feel good about C though. Like if I'm thinking of like how often I would use these characters. No, that doesn't seem right though. I don't
know if I would go that
far.
far.
I don't think I would either now that I look at the picture. I think B is fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is like Cahal is just so good that he's just on that team automatically with Ed and Resnick. And this like latest, Warrior of the Crystal premium 100 cost can't even oust Cahal for a lot, for top tier play, in my opinion.
Nope. Nope. And that's part of the reason why I like Renan is that he just can be that magic substitute because they still do well with the Dark Ramu as an other vision card and regular Ramu. You stack those two together, that's a lethal amount of damage. I think Vega still requires Bridal Elia, which changes the grade too much. I still just dock him so much for that. If you need Alphonse and you need Bridal Elia to be salvageable, you can't even put him in rainbow teams. They're like God, the more I'm talking about it, the more I want to put him in a C, but I know it's not correct. I'm so disappointed with that unit.
Yeah, the axe group isn't doing him any favors right now. There's not a lot of good units in there. There's not a lot of cards.
So we get the last two, which obviously are the two upcoming ones, which plenty of hype around. What do we think?
Speculation here.
Yeah, what do we think about Dialdo and Raph for impact here?
So it's going to be like a little bit of a spoiler for my take because I am actually working on a versus video for these guys that I'm putting out pretty soon. But I think they're both S.
Fair. I actually won't argue with that. I was very much on the edge of Dialdo being an A, if only because I think there's enough wind strength out there that, Pierce is very easily mitigated, even though it's spirit scaling. That he's got some good utility in those counter abilities and survival metrics, but I don't think it's unbeatable. But I don't have a strong case why he shouldn't be an S when you talk about ranking your tanks.
So the thing is, like, I feel like that Pierce synergy is going to be so strong. Like once people have access to like Ice Jaden, and obviously Aranea is another unit that you could throw in next to him. She's going to get her 140 upgrades. She's got a Pierce and Peril. But being able to protect against winds with within the Pierce group, I think could be actually pretty solid. Raph has the same angle because she's going to be the tank of that Maze squad. So, both have, I think, really good rainbow opportunities. And then, you were mentioning Elia. If you look at these two tanks, I'm taking Dialdo against Elia every day of the week.
Good point.
So
really good point.
That's kind of like shot him up on my scoreboard a little bit purely because of that unit.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I think that a lot of people in JP didn't get Dialdo, and that's part of the reason why Elia has been so good.
That would make
just
sense.
Because, we're seeing it. So many people are tapped out and people are waiting for Raph and waiting for certain units, still saving up, after blowing everything on Full Metal Alchemist.
Yep.
I'm sure that JP was in a similar situation. Maybe some people got Dialdo because they, invested in Bradley, but the broader player base probably wasn't able to get him. So
no, and that's one of those things that I always have to kind of look at from a JP perspective when you see what they're using for teams, and you just have to take into the effect that they don't have the 6-month view that we or 4-month view that we have. They don't have, so they can't save accordingly either, and so they are kind of living moment to moment. And a lot of what their meta is kind of what people sunk resources into. So that's a great point. That the lack of Dialdo there certainly could contribute to the uptick in Bridal Elia, which we might not see here.
Exactly. You never know when Gumi is going to throw out the preemptive counter.
Right.
Going to throw out some. We were talking in Oron J's channel the other day. I was like, maybe they're going to throw out, Grifford, or
yes,
maybe they could throw out Melnia and
yep.
Some other like crazy Earth units. They could come out with some FFBE exclusive Earth units. Raph is just a no-brainer though. Like she changed the game in JP. She's solid all-around tank, incredible kit. She's got like every survival mechanic known to man.
Yep.
She's great against strike. Good against pretty much everything. So
you're right. Yeah, they made the Esper for her. She got a vision. Like there's a lot they invested into her.
Mm-hmm.
So good. Well, I'm looking at this tier list now. I think I rearranged it to kind of be a better indication of ranking, and I think this is pretty solid. I don't think I have any big shifts. I don't know. Anything stand out to you that you want to still revisit?
I feel bad for Rugia. Gotta pour one out for him.
I know, but it's the truth. It's the truth.
I think this is, to be honest, I think this is how I would rank it if I was kind of doing this alone. Somewhere in, pretty much how I would do it, I'd say.
Same here. And I think if I were in a vacuum, just looking at this, I might end up bumping Astrius and Resol to an A. You can get into semantics with the grading versus all characters in the game. Are they really on the A tier of all characters in the game? Probably not. But at the same time, like I do think they're a cut above here. No, there we go. 20%. Well, good stuff. So that was a fun one. I'm glad we got that, last minute request to look at. It's a good topic considering how expensive they are to pull into max. And talk about, reincarnation opportunities are a lot tougher with those units because their banners are more limited, and what you have to acquire them. It's basically the same as many other units, but they're not often, if ever, on select shard tickets, so you don't have those ways to just mass pull them. But yeah, either way, good exercise.
I think that's, when we look at the first round of Warriors of the Crystal, Gumi gave them respectable upgrades. I think they got above average upgrades compared to like normal characters, by and large.
Yep.
So that's, maybe kind of makes a case for investing into them. Maybe some of this second round we'll see the same treatment next year.
Definitely. And honestly, most of these characters, if I'm still looking at them, do get a fair amount of usage. I think CTS still gets usage. We were using her in Guild Wars as recently as a week ago. I think her big thing is there's some overlap with Hio that ends up being kind of cannibalizing into each other's use. The same argument for Renan, him with Skahal, it's kind of cannibalizes into his use. But other than that, I think a lot of these characters have aged very well, to your point, and given good upgrades. Yeah, cool. Well, that's everything we had for tonight. A lot of fun Q&A things to talk about there toward the end, and a lot to look forward to this week with a bunch of releases and upgrades. But that's it for now. So we'll look forward to what we get next week with this accelerated timeline. Who knows what crazy stuff Gumi will throw on the schedule. But
yeah, good luck to everybody in the raid for Addison. Get your cell phones.
Yep.
Put that cell phone on Sephiroth and have him tweet out some pics.
That's great. Oh yeah, dude, taking a selfie over Aerith after yeah. So good stuff, man. Well, any closing thoughts you want to tell anybody, or?
No, that's about it. So, good luck with the raid. Good luck continuing to build Addison. Hopefully they're generous with those tickets so we can get a bunch of shards there and kind of speed along the process. And, I really am interested to kind of start playing with her and get my hands on her, but don't want to really invest the viz to do it right now. So.
Dude, you're gonna have a ball with her. She's so good. It's she hits damage cap for me pretty consistently on a lot of units. It's nuts. Like it happens, and I'm in disbelief when it does. It's awesome.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but that's it for now. Again, happy birthday, JB, and enjoy your night. And we'll talk to everybody soon. So take care.